Ili Nishmasa, and that the schus of this learning and the schus of many other mitzvahs and ma'asim tevim that have been done in her merit should help us all get out of this galus. And first and foremost, the schusim should be there for her children, for her family, and the Eibusher should send the ultimate nechama to her family and to all Klal Yisrael. I must say, when Meir asked me to give this shir, it's been already a few weeks where I got off the Zoom platform. I decided that, enough is enough. I gave Baruch Hashem many shiurim over Zoom, and I decided that's it. I'm just going to be doing stuff in person. Shiurim live in person, that's the way to go forward. But when Meir asked me to do this year, I, Baruch Hashem, have known the Mochkin family for many years, starting with Rabbi Yosel and many of his children. And I couldn't say no. It didn't even occur to me to say no. And I wish the family, the Mochkin family, the Zucker family, that the Eibusher should give them the ultimate nechama, like only the Eibusher himself knows how to give. And of course, the real nechama we're all waiting for, to see the Rebbe again together with us and to return together. The mother should return to her children, and everybody with Chiyas HaMesim, we should see the Rebbe again, Lamata Masara Tvachim, with the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi. That's the ultimate bracha that we're all waiting for. And actually, this week's parsha happens to be one of the parshas in the Torah where it discusses the subject of Moshiach. The Nevuah of Bilam is one of the places where the Torah pretty clearly talks about Achris Hayamim. The only time in Chumash where you actually have that expression of Achris Hayamim is in this week's parsha. There are other psukim in Torah that allude to Moshiach. There is in the brachas of Yaakov, in Parshas Vayechi. There is in Parshas Nitzavim, where it talks about things that allude to Moshiach. But the place in Torah where it talks about Achris Hayamim in those terms that we're talking about the end of all days is in this week's parsha. So it's definitely an auspicious time, and there's no time that isn't, but now more than ever for the Eibusher to finally make it happen and to bring Moshiach Lamata Masara Tvachim. There are so many things that are calling for this. There are so many things that are calling out and begging the Eibusher, enough is enough, like the Rebbe would scream, Ad Masai, Ad Masai. And now is definitely the time that we should daven even harder and ask the Eibusher to bring Moshiach, to take it from Miyad Mamish. So, for today's shir, I'd actually like to discuss something that's in this week's parsha, also in Nevuah's Bilam, and it's something that we say every single day when we come to shul. In the Nevuah of Bilam, in this week's parsha, you have the pasuk, Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov Yisrael. And it's part of the Nevuah of Bilam, and it's something that you say every morning as part of the davening. One of the opening statements of the davening is Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. And for us Chassidim, it's interesting, this pasuk, Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, has a special relevance because of the fact that it's a pasuk that the minig of Chassidim is that at the end of Shemoneh Esrei, you say two psukim corresponding to the two holy names of the Rebbe. And the pasuk that corresponds to the second name of the Rebbe is Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov Mishkanesecha Yisrael. So this is a pasuk that has a special relevance on a daily basis. It has a special relevance. You daven Shemoneh Esrei, if you're davening Shemoneh Esrei 3 times a day, and you say it at the end of Shemoneh Esrei. If you don't yet, you can start now to say the psukim corresponding to the Rebbe's holy name at the end of Shemoneh Esrei. So I would like to discuss a little bit today the meaning of this pasuk, what's the pshat of the pasuk, what's the meaning in the Pshutish or Mikra according to Rashi, what's the meaning in the pasuk according to Drush, maybe a little bit of Chassidus. There's a maimer in Lekutei Torah where the Alter Rebbe talks about this pasuk as well. It's a very lengthy maimer. We're not going to go through the maimer today, but we'll touch upon what it says in Chassidus as well. And also to see the relevance of the Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, why it's in davening. Why is that such an important pasuk that we include at the beginning of our davening? So let's begin with Rashi in this week's parsha. The simple pshat of the pasuk. What is this pasuk talking about? When it says Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov Mishkanesecha Yisrael, what is the context of this pasuk? Bilam is saying this in his nevuah, but where does it come in? What prompts Bilam to say this? If you look at the simple pshat of this pasuk, Ma Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. So Bilam is saying, how goodly are the tents of Yaakov and Mishkanisecha Yisrael. How goodly are the dwellings or the encampments of the Yidden. Where does this come into the context of what Bilam is speaking about? The question really is, if you look in the things that Bilam said, most of the things that Bilam said were a nevuah. Bilam was, the Eibishter gave him a nevuah. He intended to come to curse the Yidden, and the Eibishter switched it around to a bracha. And most of the things that Bilam is saying is a nevuah about the future, telling the future about things that are going to happen to Klal Yisrael. This pasuk, Ma Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, is not a nevuah about the future. It's something that Bilam is saying in the simple pshat of the pasuk. It's an observation that Bilam is making, looking at the Yidden in their present situation. Bilam was standing there, looking down at Klal Yisrael, the way they camped in the Midbar, and Bilam comments about what he saw. Ma Tovu, how goodly are the tents of Yidden, Mishkanisecha Yisrael, the encampments of Yidden. So what exactly is it that Bilam observed that was so beautiful and was so wonderful about what he saw amongst Yidden? So it's very interesting. Bilam was standing on a mountain. Bilam was standing on a mountain, and he was looking like a bird's eye view at all of Klal Yisrael camping in wherever they were. You look down from that angle. So what do you notice? What could you notice from such a viewpoint? What is it that Bilam saw in Klal Yisrael that he's expressing the goodness that he sees amongst Yidden? And this is, I believe, the third or fourth time around that Bilam speaks. In other words, he had already a couple of days that he was observing Klal Yisrael. This wasn't his very first statement that he said when he saw the Yidden. He had already a couple of days to see what's going on amongst Klal Yisrael. And he got a little bit of a picture. He got a little bit of a picture of what's going on amongst Klal Yisrael. And there's something unique that he observed over here. What is that? What exactly did he observe? You would expect that Bilam, looking at Klal Yisrael from his vantage point, he is able to observe the conduct of Yidden. He's able to observe perhaps the way the Yidden are learning Torah all day. When they were in the Midbar, what were the Yidden doing? They were sitting and learning Torah all day. Or perhaps he was able to observe the peace amongst Yidden, the achdus amongst Yidden, the brotherlyhood, and other, or anything very important on that level that he saw amongst Yidden. But Rashi tells us that that's not what the pasuk's talking about. When Bilam observed amongst the Yidden and he's praising them and he's telling them how goodly they are, Bilam had a very, very sharp eye, apparently, and there's something else that he noticed there. So Rashi says what Bilam noticed is, Ma Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov means Bilam observed the way the Yidden's tents were positioned. When Yidden pitched their tents, they positioned their tents in such a way that the opening, the doorways of the tents were not one across another. When you had the tents, the rows of tents that were lined up in the midbar, so they didn't line up the tents with the openings one across another. That is what Bilam noticed. And what is so unique about that? So Rashi tells us that what Bilam observed about that was, I'll tell you here the words of Rashi, he saw their doorways, that they are not exactly one across another. And the reason is, so one will not peer into another's tent. If you're right across each other, when you open your door to come out of your tent, your neighbor right across you might open the door at the very same time, and you'll have a chance to peek in. And for that reason, Yidden set up their tents where the doors were not right across each other. So imagine this. Bilam is standing presumably miles away on top of a mountain from a vantage point where you can see all of Klal Yisrael camping in the Midbar. It's not very easy to notice this detail here that he sees amongst the Yidden, that their doorways are not exactly lined up. But yet, this is what Bilam saw. Or perhaps this is what the Eibishter placed into the mind of Bilam. This is the attention. The Eibishter drew his attention to this detail because in the Eibishter's eyes, apparently, this is something which is very significant. And the Eibishter drew Bilam's attention to this detail, that the tents, the doorways of the tents are not lined up one right across another. Seems to be a pretty petty detail. Pretty petty detail. You might, if the doors of two people right across each other are opening at the same time, you might peer into another's tent. And that's the praise. That's the praise that Bilam chooses to say of how goodly are the tents of Yidden. How about something else that we know about the tents of Yidden? What does it say by Yaakov Avinu? Yaakov Avinu was a ish, tom, yeshiv, oyelim. That's how it describes Yaakov Avinu. He was a man, a sincere man, sitting in his tent all day, learning Torah. So regarding Yaakov Avinu, we also talk about the fact that he lived in his tent. And what does it represent? The fact that he sat and studied Torah all day in his tent. But that's not something that Bilam pointed out. That's not the detail that Bilam noticed. What is the detail that Bilam notices? This detail that Yidden are careful to give each other the proper privacy. What's happening behind closed doors has to stay behind closed doors. What's happening out in the public is intended for the public. The concept of knowing the boundaries, the concept of a person realizing that not everything is intended for the public eye. And there are certain things that belong specifically in the public eye. And there are other things that are intentionally intended to be left behind closed doors. So much so that not even unintentionally should it happen that somebody should be able to peer into your tent and see your privacy. It's an extremely important message, especially in today's day and age. The openness and the boundaries between public life and private life many times are torn down, especially in the age of social media, where people tend to share everything in their private life publicly. And almost sometimes every step they take, they're constantly sharing publicly everything that they're doing privately. And there's almost no boundaries between the bedroom, the dining room, and even outdoors. It's all one and the same thing. Your private life and everything that's supposed to remain modest and behind closed doors is completely open out there for the public. So what Bilam notices over here amongst Klal Yisrael is this attribute of modesty, that Yidden understand what it means that every person, in order to have a healthy, sane life, it's important that every person should keep his private space for himself. It's important for things that are intended naturally to remain private, to remain that way. If the Eibishter created every human being naturally in a way that certain things are supposed to be exposed, certain parts of your body are intended to be exposed, certain parts of your life are intended to share. If a person is not sharing of himself, and he's not exposing that part of himself that was created naturally with that purpose to share and to give and to be generous with others, so then he's not fulfilling his purpose of creation. The Eibishter is giving him a gift. Hashem gives you a gift. Your hands could share with another. Your mouth, you can speak, you can share good words with somebody else. You can even just smile with your mouth. Whatever it is, the exposed and open part of yourself where you're able to give and relate and communicate with another. So it's obviously extremely important to utilize that part of yourself and to engage and share with others. So just as it's true and it's important for a person to utilize those parts of his body and of his life and of his abilities where they're intended to be shared, they're intended to be exposed, equally as important, those parts that the Eibishter creates of ourselves that are intended to be discreet, those parts that ourselves that are deeper and they're intended to be private. They're about certain personal things that represent our personal connection to Hashem, that represent certain personal private relationships, that is intended naturally to be away from the eyes of the public. So it's intended to remain that way as well. And if a person squanders that, and if a person uses things that are intended to be internal and he brings it out externally, so then he's misusing it. And in the end, you think that you might be sharing, you think that it might be a healthy openness that will help you grow and will help you even be more generous and share you more. But in the end, if you don't keep that space sacred for yourself the way it's intended to be, not only are you not going to be sharing with others, you're going to lose of your own identity. You're going to hurt yourself. And when you harm yourself, when you're not whole and healthy yourself in your sacred place where you're supposed to be, so you have a difficult time sharing with others. You don't have the same ability to share with others. So over here, seemingly what happened is Bilam is not paying attention to the learning of Torah of Yidden, to the mitzvahs of Yidden. That seems to be something which is sort of a given. Bilam understood that Klal Yisrael is different. Klal Yisrael is different than all the nations of the world. If you take a look at the famous Medrash that's quoted about what happened at the time of Matan Torah, and the Eibishter gave the Torah, so the Medrash tells us that the entire world was trembling. People all over the world felt the effects of Matan Torah. And the Goyim, all the nations of the world, came running to their prophets. They came running to Bilam to ask him, what's going on? What is happening? The world is turning over. What's happening here? So what did Bilam tell them? The Eibishter is giving the Yidden the Torah. The Eibishter is giving the Yidden the Torah, and this is the great effect that it has on the entire world. So Bilam was well aware of the powers of Yidden. Bilam was well aware in advance of the power of Torah that the Yidden have, the power of mitzvahs that Yidden have, and the special relationship that Yidden have through Torah and mitzvahs. But here, when Bilam comes and he sees the Yidden firsthand, there's something additional that he observes. The Torah and mitzvahs wasn't what he observed, that he knew of. But there's an additional midah, there's an additional attribute amongst Yidden that he noticed, that the Yidden understand what is sacred and what is intended to be private, and the Yidden get what it means that the midah of tznius, for a person to keep those things that are intended to be private, there's a certain edelkeit, there's a certain refinement, and a certain level of understanding that this is the way Hashem created me to be. This is something unique that caught Bilam's attention, the attribute of Yidden, the refinement of Yidden. Yidden understand what's private and what's public, what's sacred and what's intended to be mundane. This is something additional that caught Bilam's attention. That's the general concept of what way Rashi explains over here, this idea of Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. But then Rashi explains that there's another detail to this, because the pasuk doesn't only say Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. The pasuk here also says Mishkanesecha Yisrael, that Bilam noticed the encampments of Yidden. And therefore Rashi says that Bilam didn't only notice the way their tents were set up, the doorways of their tents were set up, but Bilam also noticed the general outlying encampments of the Yidden, the way the Yidden camped, the way things were organized, the way each one of the Shvatim dwelled separately. They were divided with flags, each flag had 3 Shvatim to it, and then all Shvatim had their separate place and the way they camped. And Bilam, that is, Bilam noticed the beautiful family life and the beautiful lifestyle of the Yidden, the way they live, the way all the Shvatim, they stick to each other. Each Shevet has their own place. In general, all the families, the way they live, their family life, and the marriages. He also noticed the marriages amongst Yidden. As Rashi here explains, Mishkanesecha, what Mishkanesecha is referring to is, to read you the Lashon of Rashi, Ra kol Shevet v'Shevet. He noticed each one of the Shvatim, Sheichel la'atzmai. They are dwelling each to their own. Ve'enan me'uravin. They're not intermingling one with another. In other words, what Bilam saw is the Yidden do not live a lifestyle where there's this intermingling, where there are people, there are relationships that are happening between one and another, and there's all kinds of relationships, promiscuous relationships, and there are children that may not even know who their father is, may not know who their mother is, never met their father, never met their mother, and there's no family life, and there's all kinds of unhealthy intermingling that happens between one and another. Bilam noticed that unlike such a kind of lifestyle that exists amongst Goyim, by Yidden, the family life is sacred. A marriage is a marriage. Children are children. They know who their father and mother is. They know their yichus. They know who their father is. They know who their mother is. They know who their grandfather is. There is the beauty of the way they are camping, and each one separately, to keep their family life together. That is the beautiful thing that Bilam noticed. Generally speaking, it's a similar theme to the first point mentioned here, that Bilam noticed that he didn't understand how to live life, how to live life, and not just to be open in the unhealthy way and to intermingle with one another where there's no boundaries in relationships, no boundaries in families, no boundaries in anything. Bilam noticed that the Yidden did not live in this kind of a lifestyle. That people understood that I have my wife, I have my children, and this is my family, and that's something that I have to keep sacred for myself. But it's also really another important point here that is connected to this, that Bilam noticed here about the family life of Klal Yisrael. And just to touch shortly on this point, the Rebbe spoke about this Inyan 40 years ago. About Shavuos time is when the Rebbe began this campaign and spoke about it in that time period, 1980, Shavuos 1980, and that in Tavshin Mem. The Rebbe raised a big storm about the family life of Yidden. And the Rebbe spoke about it in earlier occasions and in later occasions as well. But at that time period, 40 years ago exactly, the Rebbe basically spoke about this subject by every Fabrengen, by every public gathering, and with great length and with great vigor. And the Rebbe then spoke about the Yiddish family life, that the Yiddish family life means to accept a blessing of a child that the Eibishter gives you. As long as the Eibishter gives you a blessing of a child, and al piteire, with the consultation of a Rav, you're able to have another child, a Yid should never turn down the blessing of the Eibishter to have a large family. And the Rebbe spoke very vehemently and very strongly against the American lifestyle of having family planning, where a person decides and plans and thinks that he's smarter than God himself to decide how much is enough, how much is more than enough, how much is too much to bear, and how much is too little. And as the Rebbe once told somebody in Yechidus, there was a person that once came into Yechidus to the Rebbe and discussed with the Rebbe this subject, and told the Rebbe that he and his wife are having the discussion whether they should have another child or not. And the Rebbe turned to him emotionally, and the Rebbe said to him, I don't understand you. Here in this room, there are so many people that come and ask me for a bracha for just even one child. And how many people, I'm not sure what the Rebbe said at this point, but how many people were helped over here in this room to have a bracha for one child? And you're coming to me and you want me to give you an agreement that it's time not to have more children. You're not going to get such an agreement out of me. The Rebbe spoke vehemently over the years about this subject, that a Yid, that a Yid has to accept the blessings of the Eibishter for the family life that the Eibishter gives us, that whatever the Eibishter gives us is the greatest bracha, and along with that bracha comes the greatest abilities to raise the child healthy and to raise the child for Torah, chuppah, ma'asim tovim, and to be able to provide for him everything that you need, the gashmius to beruchnius. Sorry, excuse me. So this is another angle. It's another angle to the family life that Bilam noticed here amongst Klal Yisrael when he saw their marriages and their family life, when it says Matovu Mishkanei Secha, when Bilam noticed their dwellings. Another interesting thing to be said about this simple pshat and Rashi here, the Rebbe in a Sicha in Chelik Yud Gimel, you want to check this up, it's actually something pretty unusual. It's in Chelik Yud Gimel on page 84. So if you open up the Sicha there on page 84, you'll notice something very unusual. There's a footnote in the Sicha. It's Ha'ara 34, and the words in the footnote are bolded, and they're even larger than the words in the Sicha itself. And the Rebbe there in the Sicha takes a lesson from this statement of Bilam, Tovu Ohalecha, something that's very, very practical and very relevant, especially for this time period of the year. So again, going back to the general theme over here, the point over here is that Bilam notices the modest behavior of Yidden, the behavior of Yidden, that they understand that the Eibishter creates a person that what's intended to be open and exposed to share with others, use it till the end. Share as much as you can. But those things that are intended to remain private and sacred have to remain that way. And when you switch the two, when you confuse the two in areas that you're supposed to share, you don't. And with areas that are supposed to remain private and sacred, you expose them more than they're intended to be, then you have a big problem. So then you're not using the creation of yourself the way Hashem created you to be, and it's impossible for a person to achieve real happiness that way. So the theme of tznius, which is sometimes a very difficult challenge for people to upkeep the standards of tznius according to Torah, the standards of tznius, of modesty. So the Rebbe here points out an interesting thing. A few points. First of all, the Rebbe says, take a look at what happened here. As I pointed out before, Bilam noticed such a petty detail. Yes, Bilam noticed the general family life of Klal Yisrael, which is a big deal. He noticed how Yidden live their family lives, the marriages are healthy, the children are all in a seamless environment with their family life. That's something that's a really big deal. We understand why Bilam pointed that out. But this tiny detail of the doorways that are not right across each other, because you might peer into your friend's tent. You might. And you'll look through a crack. That's really something that's pretty tiny. Very, very small detail of modest behavior. And yet, the Torah sort of equates the two. The Torah puts Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov together with Mishkanei Yisrael, that Bilam noticed these two things at the same time. How can we equate the two? How can we equate Bilam that noticed the family life of Klal Yisrael with this tiny detail of the doors not being right across each other? So the Rebbe points out, from here we see that not like what people sometimes think, that when it comes to things that are very important and very central in the right modest behavior and certain boundaries of privacy, so in those general important areas, it's something which is significant, something which is required. It's something which is required for basic health, basic sanity, and even more so, it's a mitzvah in the Torah. So if it's a mitzvah and it's something which is so basic and important that you could understand even al pi seichel hapashut, so that's something that is really weighty, something that I should really pay attention to. But a tiny detail of tznius, a little detail like this of one door across another, that's something that doesn't carry the same weight. It's not on the same level. It's just not the same thing. But over here, in the words of Bilam, which the Torah records together, Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanei Yisrael, what the Torah is teaching us is the two go together. The two go together, that a Yid has to realize that in this area, especially when it comes to this area of privacy, the moment there's a crack that's open, the moment that there's something that's supposed to be private and is exposed, so if the crack opens up, and you're doing something that's not the way it's intended to be naturally, so then once that crack is open, so then it's really very, very difficult to put a limit to it, in what area yes, and what area not. And even more, when the Torah gives us a mitzvah, what the Torah is teaching us over here is as important as tznius in the general sense is regarding the family life and regarding the general privacy of things that have to remain private is, equally as important is in the mitzvah, and this mitzvah here, to keep things private according to Torah, according to the halacha of Torah, even in the tiniest detail. It's the same Eibishter. It's the same Eibishter that says that's what's in the bedroom has to stay there and not out in the eyes of the public, and things that are obvious to us. It's the same Eibishter that also talks about a little crack in a doorway, a little inch, or whatever it is, the most tiniest things. The Torah equates them together. That's one point that Rebbe makes here. Another point that Rebbe says is, the pasuk talks about Ohalecha. It talks about the tents of Yidden. So of course, it talks about the tents because that's the way the Yidden lived in the Midbar. Yidden were camping in tents. They were temporary dwellings. The Yidden were living in a temporary dwelling for about 40 years. So that's why it says the tents. But everything in Torah is precise. And the fact that Bilam makes this point of the modesty and the privacy that Yidden had regarding the tents is also something that has a very relevant message. And the message here that Rebbe says is, the Yetzer Hara comes and tells a person that there are certain things, there are certain areas in life that are permanent there are standards. There are certain permanent standards that a person sets down for himself. Everybody wants to have standards. You ask anybody, do you have any standards in your life? Of course, who doesn't have standards? A human being has to have standards. If you have no standards, you're not a human being. An animal will do anything to get what he needs to for himself. Just if he wants to eat food, he'll go anywhere and do anything. As long as he feels he's not going to get hurt, he'll go anywhere and do anything. A human being, one of the most intrinsic natures and things that there are in the behavior of a human being is standards. Every human being creates standards for himself. So what happens is we all create standards for ourselves, and hopefully they are the proper standards. They're the standards according to Torah, according to halacha, even maybe beyond halacha, the chassidish behavior of a chassid. We all create those standards, or at least we aspire to live up to those standards. But then, every so often, when a person feels like that he's in a place or he's in a time where he's functioning below standard, it's not normal times, or he's not in his regular place, and his guard comes down. The regular standard that he established for himself, he's not ready to break down those standards. But in this place where he is right now, those standards are not so applicable because it's not in his regular permanent dwelling. He's in a temporary situation, in a temporary place, and he feels like it's just different. He's not breaking down his standards by not keeping to his standards in this situation. So the Rebbe here says the pasuk is teaching us about Ohalecha, that a Jew remains a Jew and he's true to his standards, which presumably are the standards of Torah and the standards of Chassidus. Those standards remain with him, and he has to stick to those standards regardless of where he is and regardless of the time period. A Jew sticks to the standards of Torah even when he's in a temporary dwelling, even when a Yid is in a place where he feels like that it's a weak moment, or it's a time period that's weak for him, or it's a place where he feels like nobody is around, and even I myself, I'm here alone, and it's a moment, it's a weak moment. A Yid has to remember to stick to his standards even in those temporary dwellings. And here the Rebbe brings it home to the time period that we're in now, summer. Summer, when Yidden go on vacation, you can go out here in New York. If people are listening here in New York, people go up to the Catskills, or in other places. This is where we're coming up to July 4th. And the Rebbe, even in Fabrengens, used to mention July 4th. July the 4th is like a mitzvah minat Torah for people to go out of town, for people to go on vacations and so on. So people, when they go on vacations, they let down their guard. Certain basic standards that they have al pi Torah that they stick to, and especially in the areas of tznius, people say that's different. I'm out of the city. I'm out of my permanent dwelling. So let me read to you a very unique footnote here in the Sikha. And the Rebbe wrote and added this footnote with his own Ksav Yad Kodesh, although we know that the Sikhs in general, of the Likutei Sikhs, much of it was written by the Manichim that wrote the Sikhs, and the Rebbe, of course, added and amended many things, but this is something that the Rebbe added here himself, and the Rebbe requested them that they enlarge the words even larger than the Sikha itself, and it reads as follows. V'kana mokin lahadgish. Here is the place to emphasize regarding something that's very timely. Now in the summer. Those individuals that are lenient, and the Rebbe puts lenient in quotations, because it's not really a leniency in many cases. A person may not be relying on any opinion that allows to be lenient, but he's sort of lenient to himself, even in areas that are below standard of Torah. The kama in yoni tznius, in certain areas of tznius, of modesty, the kayetz, in the summer months, ubefrat, and especially when a person is found in a temporary dwelling, the chutz le'ir, out of the city, and he's away in a temporary dwelling, and a person has a feeling, that here it's just different, it's just not the same. The attitude changes, the laxness and the guard of a person goes down. And there are those that say, I will sin and I will do tshuva. This is the lashon that the Gemara says, that a person sometimes, when he can't withstand the challenge, he just consoles himself and he says, well, I always have a chance to do tshuva later, and therefore, I'll sin and I'll do tshuva later. And the Rebbe adds, and this is a play on words, I'll do tshuva when I come back to the city. Over here, it's different. I'm outside, I'm on vacation. I can let myself go loose a little bit. When I return to the city, I'll return to my regular standard. So this is something that a person has to be aware of, And that's the lesson over here in Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, that the goodness of the Yidden that Bilam noticed was that even in a temporary dwelling, the Yidden was so careful about this. And it actually says in the Midbar that sometimes when the Yidden camped in a specific place, they may have camped there even for just one day, or maybe even just for a couple of hours. And they immediately picked themselves up and moved forward. So the Yidden were dwelling in certain places. The Yidden remained for a very long period of time. But in some places, the Yidden were there very, very temporarily. But nevertheless, they kept to their standards of tznius in all places that they were. I'm continuing another paragraph here that the Rebbe wrote on this subject. This is relevant for the conduct of men as well. Tznius, as some people may not be aware, is not just something for the women, but it's for men as well. It's brought in Shulchan Aruch right towards the beginning regarding men as well. Ubefrat lenoshim, specifically it's relevant for the women. All women are referred to as the akeres abayis, the mainstay of the home, the anchor of the home. She's the one that the entire home, the environment of the home, the yiras shamayim of the home, the standards of the home, the tznius of the home, to keep what it has to be sacred, relies upon the woman that sets the tone in the home. So therefore, tznius is so much more important for the woman than for the man. The Yesh Laharich, the Rebbe concludes this is something that could be spoken about a much greater length. But here's not the place to be ma'arich anymore on this subject. So this is all one aspect of Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. Let's turn now to something else about Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. There's so much to say on this. I don't think I'm going to get to even part of what I was going to share on this subject. But I want to turn now to another detail of Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. And that is what it says in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, of Kuf Hey Amud Beis, where the Gemara quotes and explains what it is that Bilam was saying when he said Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. And this goes into another theme. And I'll try to explain why this is something that we say every morning in davening, especially when you begin davening, when you come into shul. What's the significance of saying this pasuk? So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Daf Kuf Hey Amud Beis, says that when Bilam said Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov, from the blessings, from the bracha of Bilam, you could see what his intention originally was, that he wanted to curse them. The Eibishter transformed it into a blessing, but we could see what his original intention was. From the blessings of this Rasha, you can learn what he had in his heart. What he intended to say was that the Yidden should not have, he wanted to curse Chas v'shalom the Yidden, that they should have no shul, no Beis HaKnesses, and no Beis HaMedrash to go to daven and learn. Where do we see this? Because he said, Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. How goodly are the tents of Yaakov. In other words, the tents of Yaakov, according to this Gemara, refers to the Bate Knesiyos, the Bate Midrashos. That the Eibishter gives the Yidden the gift to be able to come to a shul, to daven, and to learn. And that is what Bilam wanted to take away from the Yidden. And then he continues, the Gemara says here, Leitishre Shchina Aleim. The Eibishter wanted to take away the Shchina from dwelling amongst Yidden. As it says, Umishkaneisecha Yisrael, that the Eibishter dwells amongst Yidden. So that's what Bilam wanted to remove. This blessing is what Bilam wanted to remove from Yidden. So what we see in this Gemara very clearly is that Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov refers to the shuls, to the Bate Knesiyos, the Bate Midrashos, that the Eibishter gave the Yidden the opportunity to come and daven every single day. And really, Rashi already says that Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov refers to the Beis HaMikdash. It refers to the fact that the Eibishter gave us the Ohel tent, which refers to Ohel Shiloi, where the Yidden were for many, many years, and then to the Beis Elamim, the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, where the Yidden brought karbanis for many, many years to be mechaper on their Avedas. Then, in the time of after the Churban Beis HaMikdash, the Eibishter gives the Yidden the gift that they can still come into a Mikdash Ma'at. Every Yid has the ability to come into a shul, to daven, and to learn every single day. That is the gift that Bilam is speaking about to Yidden, that he gives Yidden, that he sees in Yidden. And this was his intention here. He wanted to curse Yidden, to take this away from them. This is what it's talking about. So it's for this reason that the Gaonim say that we say the pasuk Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov the first thing when we enter into shul in the morning. We come into shul, we're thanking the Eibishter for giving us this wonderful and beautiful place to come and daven in shul. That's why we say this. So it applies to a person that can't make it to shul, as we've been through these time periods now in the past, when people were not able to enter into shul at all for an extended period of time, or for people that are davening and for women that are not davening in shul, they're also thanking the Eibishter for these shuls, and definitely for the men that are able and should make it their business to be in shul every single day. So this is the pasuk every morning where we're thanking the Eibishter for giving us these shuls. So, the question really is, why is this really something that's so unique? Why is this something that's so special? Why is it that we have to have a shul place of mortar and bricks where Yid can enter to daven to the Eibishter every single day? We understand why there's an importance to daven to the Eibishter every day. This is how we connect. This is the mitzvah in Torah to turn to the Eibishter. Anytime a Yid is in need, he knows he has an address to turn to. He davens to the Eibishter and begs the Eibishter to help him in every situation he's in. But the importance of the shul, the actual physical place of mortar and bricks, why is that so important? Are we a religion that relies on mortar and bricks? Our relationship with the Eibishter is so much deeper than that. We daven to the Eibishter. It's a connection. It's a personal connection. And some people may argue that that personal connection is easier for him to express when he's at home, in the privacy of his home, in a comfortable place. As some people have commented to me over the past period of months, that they were home and they had their own place to daven on their own pace, sometimes even without a minyan. It's easier to daven on your own pace, without any other disturbances. A person even said to me, in the shul that I was davening, my table mate always had his cell phone that was making noises and it was disturbing my davening. Now I was davening at home, I'm mechaya. He can daven in his pace, he can daven quietly and beautifully and connect to Hashem. So what's the importance of the shuls? Why is it so important to have a shuls of mortar and bricks that we enter into the shul every day? So let me read to you a letter from the Rebbe that I happen to have opened up to, mamish randomly. It's a letter from the Rebbe where the Rebbe answers this very question. And it was really something that I was thinking about over the past few weeks when the shuls began to open up again, at least here in New York. And some people were a little bit slow with coming back to shul, with joining minyanim again, or even if they came once a day, with the full commitment to come back to a shul, to come back to a minyan. And people felt like, I have it all at home. The 3 months or the 4 months or whatever time period it was proved to me that I can connect to Hashem and I can be a good Jew at home. So why do I have to come to the shul? So let me share with you what the Rebbe writes regarding the shul. And the Rebbe starts talking about the Mishkan, where the Eibishter required us to build the Mishkan, and then the Beis HaMikdash, and as an extension, the shuls. That we learn about, the Torah tells us, wegen Binyan HaMishkan, to build the Mishkan. Das L'chayre, now seemingly you would ask, this is a letter in Yiddish, so I'll translate. Is doch negeya la'kadosh baruch. What's important to the Eibishter? The neshama, the soul of the Jew. On ir aveda, the service of the soul, that he turns to Hashem and connects with his soul. Is zu was darf man die alle 13 oder 15 Sachen zum Aufstellen von Mishkan? Why does the Eibishter require Yidden to donate materials to build a Mishkan? There were 13 materials or 15 materials. Why is it necessary to build a physical dwelling to go serve the Eibishter there? But you can't learn in Torah and daven with grois kavana. You can learn Torah and you can daven with deep concentration, with tremendous intentions. In the privacy of your own home, or in a chutzner, or perhaps in a backyard, a beautiful outdoor minyan, whether in your backyard or on your porch or in the street. Why is that so terrible? Even when it came to karbanis, there was a time period amongst Klal Yisrael that the karbanis were actually brought on a bama. There were places all over Klal Yisrael where they set up sort of a mizbeach, and every person was able to bring a carbon in his city, in his place, in his town, and they didn't have to make the long trek to come to the Beis HaMikdash and bring the karbanas there. On Art in Mittenfeld, just out in the open field, other in Stadt or somewhere in the city. on binyanim arumden, without any buildings around, if that disturbs you. So sometimes that might feel much more spiritual. And I must say, when I was davening outdoors, I was davening under the trees, under the sky. Sometimes it felt very spiritual. You look up and you see davening in the beauty of the Eibishter's nature. There's something about it. There's something beautiful about davening in such a place, and you feel like maybe your neshama could connect even better this way. So the Rebbe says, but this is not the way the Torah intended it to be. Zetman Rabbi from the Sedra, we see over here, the Torah says, and the Rebbe is talking about in Parshas Truma, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu will, the Eibishter intended it to be, as Mezol Geben, Zov, Kesef, and Achoshes, everybody should donate from what they have, and from them, soll man machen a Keli lo Yisborach, and dort soll man davenen. Create a physical place, a physical dwelling, and that's where you should enter to daven. In the times of the Beis HaMikdash, it was the Karbanis, and today as well, Shetfilas B'Makom Karbanis, the davening today, which takes the place of Karbanis, when Azayach the Limud HaTorah, the same also with learning Torah, plus is their Kotchik Kadashim, which is the holiest of the holies of the Yid. In the Kotchik Kadashim, you add the Luchais, which represents all of Torah, was Darton is Doch Nit Mer Wie Oren Luchas V'Sefer Torah. So where is it that a Yid should go daven? Into a shul? That's the place where the Eibishter intended it to be. And from them is an uplearning of alle Zeiten. So we have the clear lesson here, and for all times, as Hashem Yisborach darf geben und git Yidden. If so, the Eibishter has to give, and he gives Yidden the ability to have Zov, Kesef, to be able to build a shul, to be able to enter the shul, as dafki b'tachtonim zol zayin avir lo yisparach. And that's where you make the dwelling for the Eibishter. So this is the point I'd like to finish off with over here, that this is a very important lesson, especially right now, for people that are struggling with this concept, or people that are sort of hesitant about the importance of actually showing up to a physical shul with mortar and bricks every single day. It's central to Yiddishkeit. It's extremely, extremely important. Besides the fact that when you join a tzibur of Yidden, a minyan in a shul, and you come every day in the shul, it strengthens your commitment, your Yiddishkeit, your connection to things to a great, great degree. You cannot in any way compare a person that's davening in the privacy of his home, and eventually that tends to slip and slide as far as his commitment in davening and his shiurim, to a person that comes in a setting where there's other people, and there's a shul, and there's a community life, and he enjoys the shul of a mortar and bricks. There's something that's extremely important and central in Yiddishkeit as far as that is concerned. But right here, the Rebbe makes the point, this is the way the Eibishter intended it to be. As far as the purpose of creation, the dira b'tachtonim requires not just the connection of your soul, but that connection should be experienced in a place of mortar and bricks, in a physical shul. You should enter in a shul, and there you should daven to the Eibishter. That's how it was in the Beis HaMikdash, and that's how it is today in a Mikdash Ma'at. The Rebbe would always say that it's the Mikdash Ma'at that we daven in today, which ultimately every Mikdash Ma'at will, with the coming of Moshiach, be combined and fly to Eretz Yisrael and be combined to the Beis HaMikdash. So there's no question about it that one of the ways to bring about the Beis HaMikdash, which is built and prepared in Shamayim to come down and descend here below every moment. It's ready any moment to come down. One of the best ways to make a keli, to bring the house down, as Rabbi Avraham Friedman sings so beautifully, to bring the Beis HaMikdash down here in this world speedily now is by entering into the homes, the house that the Eibishter gives us now, by entering into the Mikdash Ma'at and encouraging your friends to make it their business to come to shul every single day. If you can, encourage your friends, encourage your husbands to come to shul 3 times a day for Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv, or even maybe more than that, to come to Ashir and shul every single day. This is the greatest keli to be zeicha, that we should see the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash Ashlishi. May it be Teikif Umiyad Mamish.
Amen, amen. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining.
Okay. Have a good night, everyone.